Okay, so hopefully you remember from a little ways back, I would say about a month or so ago, we talk about shifts. And remember, if you have a number that's inside the parentheses, that's a shift left or right. And if you have a number outside the parentheses, that's a shift up or down. So in this case, we're going to have a shift down 1. But here, remember the sign is in the opposite order. Okay, so we're going to have a shift of pi over 4, but it's actually going to move to the left. Okay, all right, so let's just talk for a second about the original equation. So remember the number all the way in front of either the word sine or the word cosine refers to the amplitude. So your amplitude is going to be a 3. Okay, your vertical shift, we talked about that. That's going to be a negative 1. We're going down 1. Now, phase shift is another way of saying horizontal shift. That's all phase shift means. So we are going to have a phase shift or a horizontal shift of pi over 4. And then I always like to put in parentheses what direction I'm going to be going in. I think it just makes it a little bit easier when you draw the graph. So that's going to be going to the left, pi over 4. Okay. Next thing is the period. Now remember that the period of the graph is associated with the frequency. Okay, and if I look at the original equation, remember frequency is always this number that's right here. So the frequency right now is a 1. So then the period, if you recall, we had an equation to find the period of a graph, and the period of that graph would be 2 pi over the frequency. So 2 pi over 1, which would be 2 pi. Okay, so the period of that graph is 2 pi. All right, now we have something here that's new. When you want to find the interval, and I'm going to talk about what the interval is a little bit more in just a second, but to find the interval, what we're always going to do is we're going to, I think I'm going to have to shove it down here. I just don't want it to look too gross. Okay, to find the interval, it's always going to be the period divided by 4. Okay, so the period in this case is 2 pi, and divide that by 4, the interval then will be pi over 2. Okay, and again, maybe you don't understand what I'm talking about, but just give me a few minutes and I'll explain it to you. Okay, I find that graph a little bit too small for me, so what I'm going to do is I am going to put it down here. Now, we know that the amplitude is 3, right? But we also have a vertical shift down 1. So I'm actually just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 to account for that extra 1 that we have. Okay, now this is what I'm talking about when I talk about the interval being pi over 2. Remember how we would put like little slashy things on our x-axis, and a lot of times we called it pi over 2, then pi, then 3 pi over 2, then 2 pi. Okay, that's not always going to be the case. So this is telling you what they want your interval to go in increments of. So in this particular case, everything will stay the same as what you're used to. So they're saying the interval is pi over 2. What that means is count by intervals. Remember, pi over 2 is 90. So pi over 2, then another 90 degrees would be 180, right, which is pi. And then 3 pi over 2, and then 2 pi. And like I said, this will not always be the case because your interval is not always going to be pi over 2, but we'll talk about that a little bit more tomorrow in class, or a lot more in class. Okay, so now, here's the thing. I find it very overwhelming to draw this graph all at once. So what I like to do is I like to kind of simplify it a little bit. So I like to kind of mentally ignore the shifts, and I just kind of say, well, wait a minute. How about I graph amplitude, the function, and then whatever the frequency is. And remember, we said the frequency was a 1. Okay, do you notice that I just got rid of the horizontal shift and the vertical shift? Okay, and there's a reason why I did that. That's not going to be my final answer, but I find that kids do much better if we graph this first, because you guys are really good at this. Now, my suggestion to you is if you have a highlighter, please use it. I discourage you from using a pen just because you can't erase it. But I want two different colors on your graph is really what I would ideally like for you to have. So please, if you can, bring a highlighter with you to class tomorrow, or if you have like a light marker that can go over pencil, that's fine. Okay, so I know if I'm looking at this graph right here, I have an amplitude of 3, and I'm going to see one curve from 0 to 2 pi. Okay? So I would start up at 3, because that's what a cosine curve does. And I have one curve from 0 to 2 pi. That means it will end up at 3. And then in the middle at pi, it's going to go down to -3. And then remember, at pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2 is going to hit that x-axis. So here's the graph of 3 cosine 1x, which again is not the graph that they're asking you to draw. However, it's easier to have this, first graph to get the second one. So here we go. So now what you're going to do is you know that you have a horizontal shift to the left, pi over 4. Now pi over 4 is 45 degrees. The distance in here is 90 degrees. So we would actually just be shifting half of that interval. Do you understand that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put a little slashy mark in between all my intervals so that I know that's like the halfway point. Okay? All right. So let me do this. This is going to be negative pi over 2. You're going to see why I'm doing this in a second. So that'll be the halfway point. Okay. So every point I'm going to shift to the left pi over 4 and then down 1. Okay, so here we go. You ready? So here's the first point. I'm going to work my way from left to right and I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, those 5 points. I'm going to start with the furthest one on the left. I'm going to shift this one to the left pi over 4. Now remember, if I go all the way out here, that's shifting to the left pi over 2. I don't want that, so that's why I'm going to this red slash. So I'm going to go to the left pi over 4, and then I have to go down 1 right here, and this is where I'm going to put my first dot. Okay? Now, you can do this in pencil and then highlight it later. That's probably what I would suggest you do. Okay? I'm going to use a different color. I'm going to use red. So my new point is going to be then right here. Okay? All right, now let's go to the second point. So here's my second point. I'm shifting to the left pi over 4, which is right there, and then I'm going down 1, and I'm going to put a point right there. So that's going to be my second point. Okay? Right there. There we go. All right, let's go to the next one. So I'm going to the third point, which is this one right here. Shift to the left pi over 4, so just halfway, right? So to the left pi over 4, and then I'm going down 1, which is at -4 there, right? Okay, and then you're going to put a dot. So that would be right there. All right, working my way up. I'm going to take this point here, go to the left pi over 4, down 1. And put a dot. So that'll be right around there-ish. Okay, and then the last one. So this one's going to the left pi over 4, and then I'm going to go down 1. All right, and that's going to be right around here-ish. And now all you're going to do is you're going to connect those dots. And there's your new picture. So that red one is y equals 3 cosine, parentheses, x plus pi over 4, close your parentheses, minus 1. And I'm just going to put a little arrow so you know that that's the graph that I'm referring to. Okay, so the answer to this question is my red graph. But you see how helpful it is when you have like an initial graph to take it off of, to kind of copy from, and then shift whichever way you need to shift. Okay? Please make sure that you took notes in your notes packet. If you didn't, you better do it.